So for this lesson, boys and girls, you're going to take out your Thanksgiving Then and Now booklet. And you just saw the video that showed how the children lived. And that's a reenactment that is at the Plymouth Colony Museum, and they showed how they lived. Okay, so one of the things you may have noticed, they don't have many kind of tools. They're doing a lot by hand, and they all have to work together. They showed the brother and sister working together, and if you paid close attention, you'll see they didn't even have a chance to go to school. There were no schools when they first came over, so they didn't go to school or go anywhere. So if they learned how to read, it was because their parents may have been able to help them a little bit, maybe in the evening after all the chores were done. Because if you noticed, this said Pilgrim children had many chores. They helped harvest all the food, so that means like picking the corn or picking the vegetables, and then they were the ones grinding the corn. Also, they might help hunt for the food too. I mean, everybody had to help with things that were for survival. So survival meant you had to think about, the most important thing was, how are you going to eat? So they had shelter, they had a home, so then they had to focus on how they were going to eat. So maybe at night, the Pilgrims might have maybe one book they could help their children learn to read with. That might be the Bible. You know, they might have something like that to help their children learn to read with, if they had time to do that. They might not always have had time to do that. So think about how that's different from now, because now you do go to school. And then also, if you noticed, they had no electricity. They were using candles for light. And how were they cooking? They were cooking over the fire. They used fire to cook their food and to keep their home warm. Okay, so life was very, very different. The closest we ever get to living like that is if you go camping, and if you camp, maybe tent camping or something, or if you camp in a cabin that has no electricity, so you're using, but even then you have fuel. So one of the things, like maybe you have a lantern or a flashlight. They didn't have lanterns or flashlights back then either. They had no batteries. They didn't have like the special fuel that you put into the Coleman stove or your Coleman lanterns. They didn't have any of that. I'm going to be showing you a video also of how they had to make their clothes too, because that's all done by hand. You couldn't go to a store and buy clothes, nothing like that. Things weren't ready to made. You actually had to, you know, if you were making clothes out of cotton, then you had to grow the cotton and then pick the cotton, and then use a process called carding to make it available for you to make it into string, and then you had to weave the string into cloth, and then of course you would cut the cloth and then sew it all by hand. Again, everything was done by hand. So things were very, very different than how we do it now. Not necessarily better, but just different. So I'm going to finish coloring here. These are my Pilgrim children right here. Okay. And you'll see this a lot around Thanksgiving, where you'll see these Pilgrim bonnets like this and these Pilgrim hats like this. You'll see this. Sometimes you'll see them on like a turkey for decoration or something like that. And then she's wearing an apron. And then maybe, you know, for the children, they might only have like one set of clothes. They might not have extra clothes either. So, okay, so I'm finished coloring this page now. So you go ahead and color your Pilgrim people, your Pilgrim children, that is. And when you're done, put this in your back in your orange social studies folder. So again, this says Pilgrim children had many chores.